Thanks for coming today. Turn out, eat the pizza. But today we've got myself, Rory, Ahmet, Amy, and Daniel, who are going to talk to us.
I think we know what we're doing. We really don't.
Okay, so that should.
Yeah, just push the switch on. I turned it off.
We're good now. Excellent. So we've got a bit of housekeeping, and then I'm going to be talking about identity and general stuff, and Ahmed's going to be talking about security. Jamie's going to be talking about what you liked about data and AI. Dan is going to be talking about AI, of course, because that's his little buzz. And Jerome's going to be talking about Azure Core. So the two organizers are myself and Ahmed. And we've got our fantastic helpers from Microsoft, Nick and Daniel and Chimes, and a few other people that are helping. So if you're interested in coming to talk to this group, we would love to have you as a speaker. There's the barcode. It's also on our website. There's a little form you can fill in, but we really, really encourage new speakers. And we're quite happy to have a session with you, mentor you, help you with your talk, give you ideas, give you feedback. So please give it a go. That's the lineup. We'd also like to thank Arinco, who are 2024 winners, Microsoft Australia Partner here. They are the people that have paid for your pizza. So a round of applause for our sponsors and for the awesome pizzas, and especially Daniel, who's such a big supporter of ours. Thank you. So we've got a code of conduct. You don't have to read the whole thing. Really, it's be kind, avoid abuse, respect opinion, be inclusive. We're just all here to learn together. And if we respect each other, we'll be fine. So this is where we are for the meetup. Those are the coffee machines. And that is the toilets. And there are, have we got the things for the?
We set up.
Oh, yeah.
Well, these things, if you want to go to the toilet, you need this because the doors are locked at 5:30. So you can go to the toilet quite happily, but you will not be able to come back in again. So unless you want to spend the night in the toilet, I suggest that you take one of those. And there's the emergency exits. We meet out the front near the Sofitel Hotel. And you, hopefully most of you got your QR codes. If you registered on the meetup, there is a note on the meetup to say, please fill out the form. Now, we had 136 people who registered, but only 50 people who filled out the form. And if you don't fill out the form, we don't send you a QR code. So please, the next time you register, fill out the form as well. That makes our life so much easier. Okay, so I'm going to be kicking off the actual presentation. So I'm involved with identity, so Enter ID, Azure AD, B2C, Enter External ID, and independent. So I work for myself and I help people all over the world with their identity problems. So if we look at the stats, hello, David.
Thank you.
Have a seat. There were 520 sessions at Build this year, right? 295 of them had the word Copilot in the thing, right? So you're starting to see a trend. 412 had AI. Okay, so that's basically Build, Copilot, and AI. 96 were around this word agentic. Now, agentic, is that even a word? Like, it's not a word that I've heard, right? So I did some research. That word has been used in the 2010s, but it really only took off in the last year with the take-up of Copilot and AI. So a word that has only been around for less than a year had 96 sessions. There were 247 around Azure. Unfortunately, Build, some of them were in person only. You had to be in Seattle. They didn't record it. And in my little neck of the woods, which is identity, there were a whole 8. 3 were online only, which leaves 5. and that works out to 0.94%. So if you're not in AI and Copilot, there wasn't a whole amount of build for the rest of us, but that was where. And they even, when you went to the website, they even had a Copilot for build. Right? It just did build. So you could say, summarize such as keynote, and then said, here's the main summary of the keynote. And you could ask it all kinds of questions about build. So not only is it about Copilot, it also uses Copilot. So the main topic that came out was the Entra Agent ID, and Alma's going to have some more to say about it. But basically, it's available for Foundry and Copilot Studio, security, Copilot, Microsoft 365, and third parties are going to be coming along. So what is this? This is a way to see what agents you have in your Entra tenant, right? Because it's agents being put in all over the place. You need control. And without this, you don't have it. So agents introduce a new type of identity, right? Because it's not a human, it's not a managed identity, it's not a service principal. It's a new kind of identity, and it's got a new protocol called A2A, which is agent to agent. So this is a little example I gave of this guy wants to use Teams, and he says, hey, the Teams goes up to the registry. It says, I want to organize an event. And this agent will say, hey, I can do your conference booking for you. Another agent can say, hey, do you want some food? I can do your tea and your donuts. And that's all cool. But what happens if there's two agents and they start saying, hey, I can do donuts and I can do coffee. And then they start bidding against each other to get your business, right? So you could end up with the poor guys doing the food delivery, having to deliver 300 pizzas at 1 cent each because they're building down to compete. If you want to see how you do it, you go to Enterprise Applications inside Entra ID, you get down to the bottom, Agent ID Preview, and it'll show you the full list of agents that you've got. And I was on the product group call, and one guy found that his company had 1,200 agents, right? Which he wasn't aware of because these things are just being added all over the place. You need a way of controlling them. That's really important. So there were some talks from Mark Ruzinovich, who's the technical guru of Azure, and there were some talks by Scott Hanselman, who is the VP of development, and they had some really good talks together. So if you want to go and watch the recordings, watch anything by those guys, it's always good. There were some sessions on Copilot. So the really interesting thing about when you're using GitHub Copilot is that this thing is non-deterministic, right? It doesn't always provide the right or the same answer, the answer you're expecting. So they're doing this dem, and they expect it for the Copilot to tell them, do this. And it doesn't do that. And so they spent about 5 minutes trying to coax Copilot into giving the answer that they needed for the rest of the demo to work. So just keep that in mind. Mark Ruzinovich, he's an Azure technical fellow. He used to run a company way back in the day called SysInternals. You've probably used a whole lot of this stuff on Windows. Microsoft bought SysInternals, not because SysInternals are such a good company, because they wanted Mark Ruzinovich. So they bought the company to get Mark. And Mark is now the technical guy who runs Azure. He always does a talk on the future, what's happening, what he's looking at, what he's worried about. And one of the things that he spoke about this year is optical computing. So, for example, and I'm not a physicist, so don't ask me to explain it, but you could do massive parallel computations with it. So you could use, for example, gray filter in some way that would do multiplication for you. And you can use camera pixels and multiple light beams to do addition. How that works, I don't know. But the result of that, while Microsoft is working with Cambridge University in the UK, is the first analog optical computer, which is for AI, obviously, because that's where they need the power. And because it uses light, the whole thing is based on light. It's 100 times more energy efficient than any of the latest GPUs. Obviously, very early stages, but that's like really exciting. So go and watch his talk, because his whole talk is about this kind of thing, the future, things they work on, and so on. It's really awesome. So that's the end of my talk. Thank you so much for coming. And I will leave you without comment with this slide. And now you have
Hopefully it's going to work. Hey everyone, I'm Ahmed. I'm an Azure MVP. I am a co-organizer with my colleague Rory. Thank you so much. Very good turnout today. Thank you for joining us. And yeah, the nature of these, it's like best of all, this lightning talk. It's just like very high level. The idea here is to inspire and motivate you to go and actually check out the actual session or the actual announcement. The idea here is just to tell you what was the highest of Bell. And actually, that's the wrong way. All right. Yeah, so like, even though I'm talking about what is best in security, it's basically all about AI. But because it's the most, like it's the hottest topic, every environment, enterprise is looking to learn more about AI, and people are thinking, how do I use this magical agent or like magical, no longer a chatbot, it's out of that box. How do I use it to get productivity? But in the same time, how do I make sure that it is useful? So the word agentic, as my colleague Rory just mentioned, the idea about an agentic, so like if you think about it, it's in an easy way. Like we have our VS Code, right? So like VS Code is just like an IDE for you to put and write your own code. And before, it was all powerful with all the extension and plugins that you add to it. It could have IntelliSense and all of that. But now they added the GitHub Copilot. And all of a sudden, it becomes an AI-powered IDE. The idea here is that before you would ask it a question, it will help you with the answer, and sometimes it would actually see what is the tab that you are on. But now it's much more powerful. It actually is doing a task on your behalf. So for example, you could just say like, hey, look through this code base. I want to change a specific configuration or whatever. And it's really smart. It goes and reads through all your code base, understand what is the question, come back with a set of plan, execute on that plan, and then comes back to you and it's like, hey, it's all done. So that's the idea of an agentic. It's no longer just a back and forth question and answer. It's more like, hey, this is a set of tasks, go do it. And as you could imagine, it's very powerful. A lot of companies are like thinking about adopting AI, but the problem is that, can I really trust it? And you would see in a minute, why is it that we can't have like blindly trusted, even though as smart as it is, it still needs a lot of guardrails. You still need to you still need to make sure whatever fact or data it comes back with is actually factual. That's what is called grounding. So a lot of companies want to adopt AI. A lot of companies thinking about it, but they're still worried about AI system. They're still worried about is it really trustworthy? So what is Microsoft doing, and how is Microsoft helping organizations adopt AI in a safe way? So the first thing is that they have identified what are the risks. So like basically in three big domains, the risk is like either it's a malfunction, which is like the least risk of them, or it's a misuse, as in like a bad actor is actually misusing your AI tool, or it's a systematic risk. It's the actual AI itself, the AI system is doing something it's not supposed to do, right? And how is specifically zooming in about the agentic word and the agentic new era? It's the new thing. It's no longer just a question and do we have this and can we do that? It's more like, can you do this for me? The three biggest failures that you would see in an agentic, it's called task misalignment, prompt injection, and leak in sensitive data. These are the three biggest risks that you would have with an agent. And this is more details about it. So basically, these are like the three guardrails that you could put to protect you against those three risks, right? So like you have task misalignment, you have a prompt injection, and a leak in sensitive data. Prompt injection, what is that? Is that, you know what people call like breaking, what is the word? I forgot the word for it. Like you would ask the AI to do things it's not supposed to be doing. For example, there's a very famous attack called do anything now. It's called Dan, and the idea is that you would break the AI guardrails to ask it to do stuff it's not supposed to do. So that's what's called prompt injection. And of course, that's the biggest risk of every enterprise is the leak in sensitive data. So like the AI, some employee might ask like, hey, what is the salary of X and Y? And the AI was like, yeah, of course, I'm helpful. Go and grab that data. Or even worse, not just that, you would have a chatbot for your service, and then someone could ask it a question on the actual organization and would leak that sensitive data. And finally, task misalignment, as in like you ask it to do something and it goes do something else. Yep.
One again, I just didn't. How can you get the injection?
Oh, yeah. So there is a slide for it. I'll come back to it in a second. All right. Yeah. So like basically these are the guardrails. Ungrounded facts, that's the quality. So like the least harms of them is that you ask it a question and it hallucinates. That's called ungrounded. Risk and safety, basically harmful, generating harmful content, or like giving you code that is vulnerable, like someone could exploit that code. And then finally, as I said, task adherence, like you ask it something and it goes and does that. And yeah, that's what we're talking about, prompt injection. So the idea is that what Microsoft developed is something called a prompt shield. Basically right now, for example, if you go to ChatGPT, if you ask it a question, whatever mechanism OpenAI has put to protect against you, like, hey, can I create a bomb? It will say like, oh, no, I can't help you. I would just stop there. But if people could like coerce it, like, hey, for example, there's a very famous example, what was it like before, like in the 1800s? How did people create bombs? And it would think like, oh, that's a historical question. This person is not asking me to actually create a bomb, and it would just give you all the details. That is in a ChatGPT context. But if in an enterprise, what do? Is that okay? That's very difficult to accept. What Microsoft is doing here is something called Prompt Shield. It basically gives you an error right away. As soon as it feels like, hey, even if it's a historical context or whatever it is, this is not appropriate, or like this is not productive, it would just block it. You would just get an error right away. And that was like a previous iteration. It's like direct prompt shield. Basically, you ask the question, it gives you an error, say like you're not allowed to do that, right? But there is in the build, there's something else called indirect, which is basically, it's more sophisticated. You would ask it a normal question, right? But you would upload a document, that is a Word document, PDF document, or even if you're doing some data scraping, you scrape the data from the web, comes back with all sort of data. You don't know what is there. Maybe someone is doing some attack on your data. And that is what's called indirect. So you ask it a question, the question is legitimate, but the actual data part of the question is vulnerable. How am I on time? Do I still have some? Oh yeah, it's all good. I'm good on time.
And Spotlight?
What is it? Sorry. I forgot what was that. Oh yeah, so like spotlighting is that is multiple turns before you could actually reach a place where you are. So like basically it's a cross-prompt injection attack. Like you would ask it a question, you would almost like a magician, you'd like distract the AI. So like asking the question, it goes down the track, so on and so forth, until you are in a place where like you would ask it a question, and because it thinks like, hey, within the context of the whole conversation, this is good, it would give you the answer. That would also be part of what the prompt shield is doing. Yeah. Task adherence, this is like say, okay, that's all secure. You are in a place where like the agentic is secure, not not helping with harmful data or harmful content. The task adherence is that, is it actually doing what it's supposed to be doing? So like you would ask it something like, hey, I want you to grab some data and come back with me. Is it actually doing what is it doing? That is more on the quality and the productivity you get out of it. And that's another feature that is part of it, is that you would get some measures and like metrics to tell you that this agent is or is actually doing what it's supposed to do in the context that you put it in. And the there's these are all the evaluator. I'll skip through it. These are all the things that would evaluate against, like, hey, are you jailbreaking? Oh, that's the term. What is the quality, and is it doing the work? And that is actually the evaluation, the task adherence. So like, this is a very good example. Basically, it says like, the agent is supposed to do one thing, which is like give the weather data to the user. So the user will say like, hey, can I, the question is, can you give me the weather data? And because the AI it would not know what is the current, it's a real-time information, it needs to go and check something. That is what is called tool agent. It would go and ask for the weather. So like, it needs to call the location, it needs to call a time API, and then call the weather API and say like, yep, I'm getting the data. And then the response is like, hey, the temperature is actually 30 degrees, comes back with the user query and say, the weather now is this. What the task adherence is like, is monitoring the agent all over these steps and making sure like, did the user actually ask about the weather? It did. What did the answer come back also about the weather or about something else? So that's something very hard to actually measure. With this tool, you would actually be able to monitor the quality. Is it adhering to the task? And also the most important part of this puzzle is the tool agent. Is it actually going and using the tool that you gave it? Is it going calling the right tool, checking the right information, calling the right API? Because if it calls a bad API or like an API it's not supposed to be calling, that's another failure.
I have noticed that Alexa recently has been qualifying. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, it is. It's very like a little bit enhancement, but still not as good as a current chatbot. The other thing that my colleague Rory talked about is that this is much more powerful, and a very good point Rory mentioned here is that how do we deal with this AI agent? Is it an application? Do you give it all the identities and the RBAC tools, like the controls that you normally have an application? So like DocuSign, for example, that's an enterprise application, right? So you give people access to that needs access to the application with the licensing. They could do specific activities, or like they're allowed to do specific things with that application. And if you have a user or an employee, that employee also get their own identity and so on. Before this the Microsoft Entra Agent ID, it was before you give it a managed or like a service principal. You treat the AI agent as a as like an application or a service within your system. What agent, which is still in preview, it actually treats it in a very similar way, almost like a virtual employee. So you give it an ID, and that comes with a lot of RBAC tools, but it is allowed to do stuff like, hey, with this ID, you're allowed to call this API, grab this piece of data, and then put a message maybe on Teams, or like do a specific action. So that is the second tool here. And I promise I'll be quick. The other tool is Purview. It's basically using the same tool, Microsoft Purview, to prevent data, because as we said like before, data loss is one thing, or like leaking sensitive data is another. So the powerful thing here is that, like, most important thing if I want you to get out of this is that what Microsoft is doing is that using the same tool that you were familiar with before, and now using that within AI. So like, if you have if you are comfortable with Microsoft Entra, of course you will use the agent ID. If you're using Purview to prevent data loss within your organization, it's still there. And on. There's a lot more slide that talks about Microsoft Defender for Cloud, again, giving you parameters and threats on like, is this AI agentic system doing what it's supposed to do? And wrapping all of that in one package so that you have all the comfort of like, hey, I'm deploying this agentic in my system. It goes and do stuff that it's supposed to do with a very high quality, with all the guardrails around it. And you are able to at least give it a little bit of trust that it's not going to do something harmful or leak sensitive data or actually be used by bad actors. I'll just quickly skip through slides to show you one thing here. Yeah, so this is a very cool slide. This one is basically showing you the old traditional way of doing applications. So you would have any application, and that application, of course, starts with a managed identity. You would have your virtual network and network security groups. You have your own VPN gateways or like web application firewall. That's all things that we already know how to build application with. But now you have something in the middle, which is the content and prompt filtering, because your application, in the next slide, you'll see your application here. This is like a very big and busy slide, but that is basically the most important piece. But if I skip 2 slides here, that's like a much simpler application. You'd have a container app, you'd have a container registry and a container all within the Azure tenant, and you have an Azure OpenAI here. That is like basically you are enriching your application with some AI. Instead of just grabbing data, you would say like to the AI agent, can you check this information back to me and come back? And basically to add that is the custom responsible AI policy. Basically, you put it in there, you start to do all the protection. You no longer build your application in isolation or build the application and then layer the AI on top of it. It's now much more ingrained. And for you to be able to trust it, all what we've talked about before needs to come and it needs to be part of it. Yeah, that's me. And yeah.
The previous slide, complex one.
Yeah, you want to think? Yeah, so that's the whole thing after, like, of course, like it's like basically Entra app, the service principal, and all the, like it's called defense in depth, basically, which is basically you have multiple layer of security. So if someone breaks the front door, you don't just like they get access to everything. Every layer of this is like in a VNet, multiple subnets, you have NSGs, you have Entra ID, Defender for Cloud, all of that, of course, with the AI and all the prompt shield, purview, and so on, all ingrained in the application, sorry. So it's no longer just like a patch you put on top of your application. It's ingrained within the architecture and how to use the AI. And yeah, so that's me. Thank you so much.
There's just one question I'll ask you.
Oh yeah, sorry.
The authentication authorization check.
That's actually a very good question. I'm not sure. Yeah, so like the question is basically saying like, is there a way to protect our Microsoft Entra ID from a prompt shield? But I don't know. Dan, do you know about?
I was totally missed. I was saying this, I couldn't see anything.
Yes.
But
yeah, the question is saying like, can we protect Microsoft Entra ID from prompt shield? But I think basically
prompt shield's not for protecting your token or anything like that. Prompt shield is a way to determine and protect prompts coming in and determine if they are malicious or dangerous to your system.
Yeah.
And protect the identity. You still need to protect your identity in different ways.
Correct. I think the very good point here, Dan, is that you protect the prompt shield is protect you from having the AI accessing and doing stuff on your behalf. The Entra ID, like basically your prompt is not going to talk to the Entra ID. If the agent is allowed or like with the current agentic Entra ID, it would be allowed to do stuff, call APIs, access files. If it does not, then that's what prompt shield is doing. It's not basically talking to the Entra ID or talking to a service on your behalf. The agent is still being built as a service within your environment. Yeah. Any other question? All right. If not, I'll skip to the next speaker. Thank you. My slides. Sorry, I just read so many slides. So yeah. All right. Thank you.
So it's 15 minutes.
Sure. I don't think I'll go past that. Hi everyone, I'm Jamie, and a lot of topics today will be touching on AI. So I've decided to give some updates on Microsoft Fabric instead, and we'll touch a bit on AI on Microsoft Fabric, how it works as well. And I promise you that you will eventually be working on one of the features that I'll be mentioning today if you're using Fabric in your work or your organization. So first up in Build, we have announced Digital Twin Builder in Microsoft Fabric, and currently it's actually in public preview. I have played on it already. There's a tutorial on Microsoft Docs that you can go through as well. It's a concept that has been around for some time if you have worked with Internet of Things on Azure in the past, and now we're expanding the real-time intelligence with this Digital Twin Builder in Fabric. So what it means on the Digital Twin Builder, it basically allows you to create an integrated data-driven virtual representation of your real-world systems, environments with synchronized interactions at a specific frequency and also fidelity. You can also hook up those digital twins with your real-time data. And once you have created the replica, for example, if it's an airplane engine, if it's a building, it could be a wind turbine as well, some sort of schematic piece that you have created, you can take that piece of your physical asset and be able to model it with using the data points. And you can also bring it directly into OneLake with the capability, and it's all integrated. You can also create relationship with the data and all the related data assets within Fabric itself. And you can also generate new insights to help you to drive outcome that you require in your operations efficiencies that you're looking for. I also want to touch on that the Digital Twin Builder in Microsoft Fabric actually uses low-code to no-code approach. So when I was playing it, I do not need to use any Python, C++, any programming language. It was just click and shift, no-code to low-code. So it's really user-friendly if you want to start on the and play with it for the Digital Twin Builder. And it's all really easy for the action items, decision makers, and operators to also visualize the data within the Twin Builder. And then also you can act on the analytics bits of it as well. And how it works is that once you have modeled your Digital Twin Builder in Microsoft Fabric, it's no longer just your customer's product or order. You can actually model the data sets like the factory with multiple production lines having different stations, for example, and you can actually understand what is happening in real time as well in such complex environment. And basically, we can see how real-time intelligence is taking off with customers who has large amount of data and also physical assets in their company that they're managing and they're tracking as well. And Digital Twin Builder would be a good tool for them to use. Next up, I want to also introduce the shortcut transformations in OneLake. So shortcut has been a while already if you're actually extracting data from other sources, for example, OneLake, Azure, AWS, Dynamics Data Lake as well. And basically, there's a new term which is called AI transformations in OneLake. And this feature basically addresses a lot of productivity challenges when you're working with diverse data sources across different cloud platforms. And to start with, I'll talk a bit about OneLake. So OneLake is basically a core part of the Microsoft Fabric. It gives you an open, governed, and unified data lake experience. You can bring in virtually any sources, for example, Snowflake, cloud-based or on-premise data as well, for example, SQL database. And you can also store structured or semi-structured data. And with this shortcut transformation, I actually have a video later that I'll show you. We're trying to resolve a lot of productivity challenges for a lot of the end users. And traditionally, when you're trying to ingest data into OneLake, it requires a lot of manual transformation. For example, you might use a notebook, a data pipeline from your source, and you want to convert it to a Parquet data lake format. And this process can be quite labor intensive. You might need probably 1 or 2 data engineers to work on it, and it can be quite time consuming as well. And with this shortcut transformation, it can automate the process and has the ability to transform your source format, whether it's in text format, CSV format, and you can just transform it directly from the shortcut to Delta Lake format. It's basically called, Shortcut
to what format?
to Delta Lake. So for example, if your shortcut is coming from an Excel CSV format, with this shortcut, there's this AI transform in the middle, and on your destination, it will just be a Delta Lake. Yeah, so you don't have to go through any pipeline, any notebook to convert. Delta, Parquet. Yeah, sorry.
Sorry.
Yeah. And so not only converting the version, the source format for the file, you can also apply PII redaction as well, directly from your source to your destination. You can also do translation, document summarization. You can do document classification as well. So currently this one is still not in preview yet. It's still coming soon on the build updates. But next up, I actually have a video that I want to show that basically tell you, so this video would be focusing on, I'll just pause a bit first. So this video would focus on PII redaction. So to start, there's actually folders in our lake house that you can see. And on that middle part, you can see all the core transcript text file. And we'll just take a look at what this file looks like. You can see there's the name, email address, and you basically want to remove the PII from this file. In most cases, you would want to create a schedule process on your Daha pipeline and using a notebook or some sort of transformation or integration tools that you require to actually remove the PII. So not anymore. What you can do is you just create a shortcut here. And then after that, just follow what you want. You click the lake house, and then you click the folder that you require, which is the original transcript. And then after that, I'll just pause here. You can see there's this PII redaction, and you can see some other areas as well: sentiment, translate, text summary, and doc summary. So it's really powerful. I'll just continue this. So that's where the magic actually happens. Once you have selected the PII, you create your connection. And then once it's connected, and I'll just rename the files, the folder, so that it's redacted transcript instead. And then the PII detection will just execute over all the text files. So now that I go back to my redacted folder, you click on it and you see it, all the information is redacted. And I did not use any pipeline, I did not use any notebook to actually do the transformation. So it's really good. Yeah, but you might also think, what about if you have more files on your original folder here? What happens to those files? Are they being transformed as well? Do you need to do any manual click to go through all the redacted thing again? So what happened is I'll just add a new around 4 files in the original folder. And what you can see is that once you have uploaded it, if you go back to your shortcut, you refresh it, it will show up and all of them are redacted as well. So basically this shortcut is self-maintaining, which means that there's a very little work for you to do and a streamlined process is available. And yeah, you save a lot of time and less data engineers would need to actually monitor this, whether or not the pipeline works, the pipeline fails. That's pretty much for this one. So this is coming soon. It's still not available.
Charge fabric. Yeah.
Yes.
You could.
Yep.
The cool thing about that, sorry, Jamie, for interrupting. The cool thing about that is that you don't need to stand up your AI model. You don't need to do anything. That's pre-canned, pre-baked into the fabric and the fabric capacity. So we'll use the FSKU, do all of that for you, without you having to build all the plumbing or to do that as well.
So this is only one of the small features that I show, which is PII redaction. But as you can see, there was like translate. If it's coming from a different language, you can actually translate it to the language that you want. On top of that, this is just AI transformation. Like I mentioned just now, if your source is coming from like a CSV, a text, you can actually transform it directly to a Parquet format. Yeah. So next up, this is just a quick refresher. It's been out for some time already, around 2 to 3 months. So in the past Copilot and AI experiences on Fabric, it's available starting from F64 SKU onwards. But now it starts from F2, which is the lower SKU. So as long as you have Fabric capacity, so it's not available on Fabric trial, but it's available on the paid SKU from the lowest onwards. So next up, let's talk about AI and agents in Fabric as well. So how can you build your own data agent and actually customize it on top of your data in one lake? So right now we have renamed it to Fabric Data Agent. It's actually previously called AI Skills if you have used it in the past, and basically it's a feature that we have actually launched last year. We have since renamed it to actually better reflect its growing capability. Oops, sorry. And then at its core, basically Data Agent is actually designed to reason over your data in one lake. I think it's coming from this slide. So, okay, coming back to Data Agent, it enhances your existing semantic model and also allows you to apply configuration to make these models more AI ready. But we're also wanting to go a step further, whereby you want to actually build a conversational agent that can intelligently reason over multiple data sources in one place. So just like your report and also data sets, Data Agent, you can also create it in Microsoft Fabric. It's a first-class item. You can actually have those lineage tracking, sharing capability, permissions. And once created, you can also surface the Data Agent on your home Copilot as well, which allows your users to actually ask questions directly to the Data Agent via natural language. So any language that you put, you can actually reason over. You can ask questions based on the semantic model that you have. And Data Agent, so how it works is that it actually can reason over all this. So you can include the lakehouse tables from a lakehouse, warehouse as well, semantic model, and also event house. So if you have any real-time data that you're streaming through event house, you can actually connect all the sources, data sources into the Data Agent as well. And what it does is that it comes with a set of built-in tools. So for example, these tools, you can ask natural language, it will return the results that you want. On top of that, it will give you, for example, a SQL query. It could give you a DEX measure as well. So depending on what sort of prompt serve in, you might want to look for a result. It can give you those return in terms of DEX measure, Kusto query language, or SQL as well. And in future, you can also expect a broader range of tools in Data Agent as well. There's multiple ways on how you can consume the data that I have. Essentially, it's just prompt engineering. And you can do everything with natural language instead of code. And you're trying to guide your agent on how to handle a specific type of questions and also giving some kind of context that it needs to deliver some sort of responses to your consumers. Lastly, once you have done all this step, you just publish it. So once you have created the published version, what it will have is that it will have an endpoint as well. The endpoint, you can use it in your notebook. You can also use the endpoint to integrate in AI Foundry as well. And once you have published it, you can share it to your users to use it on Teams. You can use it in the Fabric itself as well. You can use through the Copilot functions. And like I say, in future, there will be more agents or endpoint that you can integrate with. And yeah, that's pretty much my slides for today on Fabric and how Data Agent also play a role in Fabric as well. Next up, I'll invite Daniel to give. I'm fine. Hey.
Got a team? Yeah. Welcome. Thank you all for coming along. Just before I introduce myself, I just want to shout out to all the people who actually work behind the scenes to help us do this. So shout out to Chimes Online and Jess and the whole crew that run our facilities. I think we don't thank them enough because I know it's a lot of work to help for us to put these on. But I just want to also thank you guys for all showing up and giving up your time to hear about this stuff. And I don't know about you guys, but it's like a fire hose for us. There's just all of this information coming at us, all of this change. So I'm not going to try and give you everything. I'm not going to try and tell you all the things, the AI stuff that was announced at Build. I'm just going to cover a few things. But what I really want to focus on is how do I clarify some of the stuff? because it's all hit us and so fast and it's changed so quickly. What I'd like to do is think about, well, what are the things that the questions that I hear every day from the organizations I work with, that they go, I don't get this. This is confusing. What? So there's three things. Number one is AI Foundry service. A lot of people sort of hear the term. Who's heard of AI Foundry, by the way? A few people have heard of it. That's more than I thought. So that's okay. We're going to win. But it used to be called AI Studio. The challenge was it was not really clear what it actually is. When we're building modern AI applications, we often need more than just one thing. You know, often we think of it, oh, it's just an LLM. We need a large language model like GPT-4o. But that's not the reality. Reality of a modern AI application is we have front ends, middleware components, we have different types of large language models, we have small language models, we have narrow AI, traditional things like computer vision, speech to text, text to speech, all of this stuff. And it became really overwhelming to build an AI application. You kind of go, oh, do I need that or do I need that? And you end up with like 20 services. You know, there's actually 40 plus AI services, each with their different endpoint in Azure. And you end up with this medley of services for any modern AI application. So Foundry brings all of those services together and hides them behind some, what we call project endpoints. So just an API, but you can point your application at it, your SDK, which is actually the Foundry SDK, or semantic kernel or Autogen, but we'll gloss over those for now. You can point them at a single endpoint rather than trying to knit all of these services together. So it simplifies your AI applications. But AI Foundry makes up a number of different things. So obviously this is the large language models. Can anyone guess how many large language models are available in AI Foundry? Anyone want to,
50.
Okay, keep going. Well, over 10K. I don't have a prize, so you just have to feel rewarded that you were closest. There was 11,189, I think, as of yesterday. It goes up every day. There's a lot. So all of those large language models are available in the Foundry model. So there is also the agent service. Now that, we're going to speak about that a little bit more in a moment. That is a service that brings together all the things you need to run an agent, which is actually more than you'd think. It contains a number of different things, such as knowledge, such as actions, and then be able to call tools and external services. All of those things are bundled together as an agent service. You don't have to use that. You can build your own agents other ways, but it brings it together with that. It also brings together things like prompt shields. All of the other content safety that you were talking about are also available in there in that one place. Azure Machine Learning, we're not going to talk about that. We're going to ignore that for a moment. And of course, the observability is added into that in the bottom. So monitoring, evaluation, all the other things that you need to do to build an AI app. Because you can't unit test an AI app, by the way. That's something, if you take away one thing here, you cannot unit test an AI app. You can't use traditional testing methodologies. You need to use evaluations. All of that stuck together in one place. But it also adds a user experience on top of that that you can or might not choose to use. The user experience sits on top of Foundry service that allows you to do things like play with the playgrounds and experiment, explore, and learn how to use Foundry. But you can take that away and still Foundry service is the heart of your AI application, right? So you're going to interact it with the Foundry SDK. You can call it with, even talk to it with GitHub, use Visual Studio Code, Copilot Studio. They can all talk to Foundry. And you can build your applications using all the normal Azure services. So that's essentially Foundry in a nutshell. There is one other thing that was announced at Build, which was Foundry Local, which sometimes you want to be able to run a large language model, or probably more like a small language model, on your local machine or on a machine outside Foundry, but you still want Foundry and your application to interact with it like it's a normal model inside Foundry. Say you've got your own IP, your own model that you've trained, but you want to be able to call it with Foundry like anything else. You can now do that with Foundry Local. All right. One thing that we really glossed over at Build was Foundry V1 versus V2. In fact, we don't even talk about Foundry V1 versus V2, but up until now, we've all been using something called Foundry V1, which was basically hub-based project mode. If you deployed a Foundry resource, you would notice it asks you first, hey, you need to create a hub. And that consisted of the hub, an Azure storage account, AI services, and a key vault. So you had all this machinery that you needed to deploy before you could even start building your AI application. And that was a bit of an annoyance and a bit of a hurdle, to be honest. A lot of people go, I'm overwhelmed already. Don't tell me to deploy all this stuff. But one of the things that was announced is a new mode called Foundry Project Mode, where the hub goes away. It's still available. You can still use it, but it effectively takes all of those services like the storage and the AI services, the key vault, and sticks it inside the Azure AI Foundry service and makes that the only thing you have to deploy. So it's a lot simpler. There are some caveats though. For example, Azure AI Agent Service is available in both modes, but it's only GA and V2 mode. So if you're going to use Azure AI Foundry Agent Service, which is an absolute mouthful, if you're going to use that, you can only use it in V2. You can use it in V1, but it's not GA, so you're not going to get supported. So you have to use it in V2. There is actually less models available in V2 right now, right? So not every model is available in V2. There is also a preview service that is only available in V1, which is called Azure Content Understanding. Who's heard of Azure Content Understanding? Wow, okay. So briefly, I didn't mean to talk about this, but effectively it is an AI service you could throw any content at, video, audio, images, documents, and give it a schema, a JSON schema saying, I want the address, I want a name, and I want a phone number. And it will find that data in whatever content it is and spit it out in the format you give it to it. That is only available in V1. So if you're looking, obviously the fact that no one has heard of it probably means you're not worried. So, but when you do come across it, and it is a very powerful service, you're going to look at it in either V1 or wait till it comes to V2. So that's a real shout out. You need to know there are two modes. Okay, moving on. I got 2 more slides. So one of the other problems we have when we're building an AI solution is models have different capabilities. You've got really, really powerful reasoning models like O4 and DeepSeek and so on, DeepSeek R1, and you've got faster, cheaper models such as, 4.1 nano, right? These are really fast. They're not as smart, but they get the job done very quickly and they're very cheap. Often you don't know which model your solution is going to need. And what if you're building a chat solution and someone says, give me a recipe for a pizza? You don't want to throw it at a $20 per million token model, which will cost you an arm and a leg to give someone a pizza recipe. But if the answer, need someone who says, I want you to build me a business plan and think about the geopolitics that's occurring in the US at the moment, whether I should open a new retail chain there, you need a very powerful model. But you don't often know at design time what you're going to need. So model router is a new thing, a new type of model. It actually looks like a normal model, but it has an SLM, a small language model at the front, which makes a decision when you send your request to it. Are you asking me to build a business plan, or are you just asking me for a pizza recipe? Don't use those as the exact examples, but you get my gist. It says if you're looking for something fast and cheap, I'll give you a fast and cheap model. If you're looking to think deeply, I'll give you a model that is going to think more deeply. So that allows you to not have to make the decision about which sort of model to use until runtime. And that's really important because we used to have to do this ourselves with intent detection and a whole lot of smart stuff. And now you don't have to. And the cool thing is you can just drop it in. If you're already using a chat completions model, you can just drop this model in place and suddenly your application has the ability to be smart and not so smart. Finally, last slide. Agentic retrieval, another really, really important part of building modern AI systems, whether it's agentic AI or not, is that we need to give our models grounding information. One of the hardest things we have to do is make sure that when we interact with the large language model, we are providing with the prompt the right grounding information. When I say grounding information, if I ask it for an assessment of my internal business plan for my company, the model does not trained on that. It does not know that. So I have to pass it in as grounding information. But how do I make sure out of a big index of, say, I have 1 million documents, that it's finding the right chunks? That used to be something we had to take care of as engineers. We would use a semantic index, we still do, to basically find the right chunks in our solution. But that was pretty smart, but not smart enough, especially when we're talking about, millions, if not tens of millions of chunks of data, where we can only maybe find 100 and give those to the model because we can't give it the whole data structure. Now we've got something called agentic retrieval, which essentially will allow us to pass the entire conversation plus what we're asking it into a SLM query planner, which is all hidden behind everything. We never see any of this. We just say, I want you to find the relevant chunks. It then looks through that, passes it through to an SLM, and then writes several different queries depending on what is needed. It then passes all those queries through to the index, the RAG index, the retrieval, the Azure AI search index, finds each of the relevant chunks, puts them all together, and then re-ranks them. So meaning it looks at them and says, actually, let me make a judgment call. That's actually better than that. That's more important than that. That all happens behind the scenes and it's built into the index. So we don't have to worry about it. We just get a huge boost in the relevancy of the data that's being passed to the model. So with that is me. That's me done. I tried to keep it short. So I'm going to hand over JB. Thanks, guys.
So while we do the mic change, everybody stand up. Move around a bit, take a big deep breath, let it all out. There's been a lot that's been coming through, and we're not stopping at this point either.
Photo of that. Yeah, that's terrible.
Right. Okay. So my name's Jerome. I'm a principal consultant with Mantle and MVP in DevOps, and a bit of a false advertising at the start where we sort of looked at the best of Azure Core. Azure Core is far too big, and so I'm going to focus in particularly on DevOps side of things as well. Now, again, we're going to go through like the rest of this. This is going to go through really quickly. If you do want to know more about particularly the first two that we're talking about, and especially the GitHub Copilot coding agent, I'll be posting this week the talks that Dan and myself did last night at the GitHub user group, and we'll go into those in more detail from there. So we'll be able to skip through those reasonably quickly. But really the big thing, and I suppose the first question to ask everybody is, who's got everything on their buzzword bingo card yet? Because it's all been AI. This was the theme of Build, and you've heard that as we come through. Everything is all about AI, and everything is all about AI agents. And we've had AI, and AI has been dealing with how we write our code. Now what we're seeing is the shift that the agents are now moving away from just writing our code to now maintaining our code, to maintaining our applications. So who here is responsible for maintaining or deploying infrastructure to support applications? Yeah. Who here is responsible for maintaining applications? And big overlap in that group. And we've got developers here obviously as well in terms of that. And so in a sense, for those of us that have that infrastructure background, and I have the infrastructure background, not the development background, we're now starting to see that not only now are we looking at having AI write our infrastructure code, our Bicep, our Terraform, our ARM, if we really feel masochistic, and everything like that. But now what we can actually start to do is our aim should be as infrastructure people, as platform engineers, this new term that's kind of come out over the last few years, or then the site reliability engineers, is how do we enable the developers? How do we really get this DevOps going to actually do a lot more, but in the workflow that the developers are used to using? Because they're now getting used to using Copilot. They're used to using these agentic tools to help them speed up their development. Now we want to be helping them to speed up their deployment, to speed up the infrastructure. But more importantly, and this is the thing, is what is this agentic DevOps? AI-powered agents operating as a member of your team. And they say, and Microsoft is saying dev team, but I'm saying here this is our operations teams as well, to automate, optimize, and accelerate every stage of the software lifecycle. So not just the creation of new, not just the uplifting of the old tech. We talk about that a lot in the GitHub user groups, but also the maintenance and the run. And one of the most exciting things we'll get to at the end of it, I think, that's coming out of this is for SREs not having to be woken up at 3 a.m. with a P1 incident. And we'll get to that as we come through. So agentic AI, DevOps, what is it? Explain it to me in English, please, because everybody likes to do this. And I will admit that I shamelessly ripped this off down in the bottom there, agentics.org/DevOps from GitHub. They have an agentic DevOps tool set that they offer as well. But they went through and explained, what does it mean to have agentic DevOps? Autonomous operation. So infrastructure and applications are being written and deployed with minimal human oversight. The self-healing systems. So it fails, but these tools can get in, identify the failures, and work out how to remediate the issues. Continuous optimization. I mean, I can tell stories of working with organizations where things like the core business system is down and they're relying on a third party, and the problem is they've loaded into the SQL database a query that is absolutely smashing the database because they're doing about 74 select stars and joining them all together. How can we find those earlier but then resolve them quickly when they come through? How do we reduce the complexity of everything that's going on? I mean, we've seen some of the slides here about the complexity of modern applications, and as we deploy more and more microservices, the complexity of our stacks just increase. Yeah, everything standardizes on Kubernetes, but now you're trying to work out which microservice calls which one to this one, to that one, to that one. And now you have one pod, fantastic for my microservice, with 84 sidecars doing all the processing for you. How do I know what's going on? I can't hold all of this in my own head. So how can the tools help me to work through all of this? How can we eliminate the repetitive tasks, be more efficient in the work that we're doing? I mean, I talked last night about uplifting code. I mean, who here likes trawling through log files? Who enjoys staring at the console and working their way down log after log after log, crafting these beautiful KQL queries to bring in everything, to find the piece of information? We just want to solve problems, don't we? Give us a problem, let us solve the problem, but how do we get into the efficiency? How do we get rid of those mundane tasks and deliver it better? How do we do it while increasing security? Because the more of this that's going on, the more places there are for somebody to get in. We don't know what's going on. Gone are the days where, they were never fantastic anyway, where you had your perimeter firewall. Everybody would come in and you trusted everything inside the network. Those days should be long gone, that we don't trust everything inside. But how do we increase that security? How do we do this? And how do we do it without having to learn specific languages? Why do I have to learn Go in order to be able to update a Terraform provider? And I have to learn a Bicep, and I have to learn some Python, and I have to learn some PowerShell, and I have to stitch that together with a Bash script. And it's too much. Let me talk. Let me communicate my intent, and let something else, let the computers work that out. Now, it's important for us to work out how we communicate in English effectively at that point. but at least it's one language, not 83. How do we extend what we're doing? How do we make it more robust? How do we provide more opportunities for developers when dev teams come in and want access to new tools? How do we provide that to them more quickly rather than being the gatekeepers and the blockers that say, I'm sorry, you can't do this? And most of all, how do we make sure it's all documented? Now, let's be fair. None of us like writing documentation. None of us like reading documentation. But documentation is important. It's been well said, the only thing you leave at a company when you depart is the documentation. You take all the knowledge with you when you leave, you've got to make sure that it's documented. How do we keep the documentation up to date? How do we make sure that when a change is made, documentation reflects that? But again, without spending 3 weeks writing documentation, because nobody likes doing that either. That's what agentic DevOps is promising to us. Yes, it all sounds like rainbows and fairy dust, but it's close. It's coming. We thought about that for code writing, but now we've got it for the operational side of things. So what's the foundation? How does this all work? How do we get this together? Well, foundationally, we get it through agents. So what are those AI agents? They're crafted pieces of software that are designed and tasked to go and do certain things. But we do it not just with a collection of agents that I now have to sit here and feel like I'm herding cats, pushing them upstream with a rake to try and get it all to happen. No, the aim is to actually get to the point where we communicate to a supervisor agent. That supervisor agent now goes out and starts bringing in other agents, and they do that through agent-to-agent protocol. We saw that talked about in the Entra ID. This is why Entra ID needs the agent identities, so that they can talk to one another. They can work things out together. The supervisor can go and ask the QA bot to do some QA, to go ask the dev bot to do something, to ask another one to do something else. And then it all bubbles up for you from there and through MCP servers. And so this was one of the things that kind of came out, that MCP is a massive thing. So MCP servers, for those that aren't familiar, are an interface into other things, but they're a standard language that agents know how to communicate on. And so we see here, I mean, we've obviously got our Azure MCP server, GitHub, Fabric, DevOps, but then there's all these other tools that become important as we're going to start seeing through. For example, Figma. And so some of the demonstrations at Build were around interacting with the Figma MCP server to say, the designers have gone and updated it. Go and fetch the design out of Figma and code it. Think about that. Here's the designers have done it. Now it just goes out to do it. We tie in with the HashiCorp one into the Terraform. Let me find how I write Terraform effectively to deploy the stacks that I need in order to get them working. Tying in with Notion, because maybe that's where you've got a lot of your documentation. That's where your thinking is. Tie and grab data out of there from there. See, all of this integration is all available through MCP servers, and the number of them is just increasing as we go through. So that's agentic DevOps. That's the goal. That's the mindset that comes from it. And Microsoft announced 2 key technologies at Build that will help us get there. And so the first one I'm going to skip over reasonably quickly, mostly because Dan talked about it last night, and I'm going to cheat and use a demo that came out of GitHub from there. But the first one is the GitHub Copilot coding agent. What this allows you to do inside GitHub is, if you have a Copilot license, you get an issue. In the issue, you assign that issue to Copilot. Copilot will take the description in the issue, go away, reason it through about what it needs to do, come up with a working solution for you, put it in a pull request, and allow you to review it. Think about that. Somebody raises an issue about this functionality is not working. Let's assign it to the agent. Let's go to bed. Let's come back in the morning. Hopefully we didn't run out of premium credits, but come back in the morning and review a pull request for it. And so let me just quickly show this demo from Microsoft. And okay, we've not got.
Let me show you. We're building a website for Copilot Airways where users can book flights, but the form doesn't have any input validation. It seems straightforward, so let's assign it to Copilot. Copilot reacts to the message, showing that it's aware of the request and is taking action. Copilot then creates a pull request behind the scenes and gets to work. Copilot forms a plan and keeps the pull request description up to date as it progresses, working asynchronously while we get on with other tasks.
You turn off your mic.
Now, we believe a human in the loop is important, and we wanted the review experience to feel natural as any other pull request. So as you might expect, you can review the changes and add comments like you would with anyone else from your team. Here, Copilot acknowledges our comments to create a GitHub Actions workflow and iterates on the task. When working with Copilot, or even afterwards, you can view the session and understand how Copilot is approaching the problem. In this example, it explored the repository for existing workflow files, formed a plan, and created a new workflow file. Copilot can also run tools like linters, build, and tests to check the quality of the code it's suggesting. Now, like any other AI-generated code, you should review the code before executing it. This is why you will see a button to approve and run before executing any GitHub Action workflows. Now, as we've reviewed the code and our quality checks have passed, we can mark the PR ready for review. But you're probably wondering how it turns out. Here it is. Our form has been updated with real-time validation and an improved user experience. Let's get that merged. Thanks, Copilot. To learn more about the Copilot coding agent, visit gh.io/copilot/coding-agent.
So there's Copilot working for you while you sleep. As easy as that, theoretically. Now, again, this is still in preview, but it's just been announced now. Initially, when they released it at Build, it was only available to Pro Plus and to Enterprise users. It's now available if you're on the Copilot business plan. So that's happened overnight in terms of that change. Well worth a try. It's a great way to do it. The key thing with it, as with anything, make sure your description in your issue is really well crafted. Because if you put a really good description in there, you'll get a really good result. If you put a really poor description in there, you'll get the result that you deserve. And it gets even better. Yeah, question.
Possible to have it integrated with Azure DevOps, and most of the repositories when it comes to the companies or workplaces are over there compared to GitHub.
Yeah, so I'll put the consulting hat on, I'll put the Microsoft hat on in answer to that. The answer to that is move your repos to GitHub. Stay in DevOps for your boards and your pipelines and so forth from there. So Microsoft is really pushing and making it really easy to get your repos migrated out of Azure repos into GitHub in order to take advantage of that. And from a licensing perspective now, if you license GitHub Enterprise, you then get licensed for basic in DevOps so that you can continue using that workflow. So no, not if you're using Azure repos. You do need to move out to GitHub repos. So this is one of the driving forces to do that. And I think we'll see more of that kind of happening. I mean, the question has always been, and Microsoft refuses to kind of acknowledge it completely. They own GitHub, they have DevOps. What's the story? I think we're going to see a lot more of, there is a place for DevOps, and they've said that. DevOps is not going anywhere. But I think particularly the repo functionality probably will. So again, read between the lines when you get this kind of functionality, but it's easier for them to put it all in one place rather than try and spread it across two. What you can also do, and they demoed at Build, is you can also now post into the chat for the issue a screenshot. So let's say you get a bug report from a user to say this button isn't where it's supposed to be. It needs to be over here. Grab the screenshot, mark it up in Paint, put that into your issue, let Copilot go to work about moving the button 14 pixels to the left. Done. As easy as that. So it's not just text anymore. And again, this is the whole point about these agents working as a member of your dev team, of your team. They're not going to replace us. They're going to change the work that we're doing. So we've got to learn to adapt and go from there. And then the second one. So we've got the agentic DevOps. The second one that they announced is the Azure SRE agent. Now, who's seen the details of this or heard a little bit about SRE agent yet? SRE agent is going to make SREs really, really happy. The whole point of the SRE agent is to monitor the infrastructure, monitor the applications, respond to alerts, and try and solve the problems for you when they happen without waking you up. Think about these kinds of options. You're getting timeout errors. SRE agent steps in on the basis of the timeout errors. It jumps into the logs. It loves reading logs. It'll get in, it'll find the logs, and it'll work out, why is this not working? Why is it timing out? Maybe it's because the application is under a whole lot of extra load and you didn't configure your scaling rules well, or maybe you didn't configure them at all. So it looks at it and goes, memory utilization is too high, CPU utilization is too high. Simple solution, throw another 3 replicas at it. 3 replicas come up, everything's done, away it goes. Simple as that. What's that?
Will it pay for it?
No, sadly it won't pay for it. But this is the thing with consumption side of things is, again, the aim is to go, where do we need it? Where won't we? We put limits around these things as well. You don't let it scale out its 400,000 instances that it actually wants because somebody worked out how to crypto mine off your application. So there's balances, there's guardrails that we've got to be putting into play around this. But it means that we're not being woken up at 2 a.m. because we've got a spike of traffic. Ticketmaster. Census. The list can go on about places where you would think that they'd learn to scale it before they do. This can help with those side of things. But maybe it's not a case where you've got too much traffic coming in. Maybe the situation is actually there's a bug in the code that on certain code paths is being triggered. And so in going through the logs, the SRE agent can work through that. If it's tied to your Copilot repository, it can in GitHub, it can pull the code in, look at the code based on the stack trace error that's come out, and then raise an issue in GitHub, which could be assigned to Copilot, to create a fix, and then be waiting for approval. Now think about that. The situation where you can get through the logs, identify in advance what might happen. The ultimate goal of this, I think, would be to get to a situation, and I remember talking to an old colleague of mine, they used to have a real problem with an application and running on the Microsoft stack at one point. I forget which application it was. But through a lot of hard work, a lot of diligence, they were able to identify a bug, I think it was in Windows Server, and they managed to identify, and they could, with 100% accuracy, identify when they were going to crash the server within 45 minutes. And so they needed to take some tasks, but they could get there before the server crashed because they now started to understand that. Well, you throw the compute power of a few agents at some of those problems, they can find a lot of that for you. And then if it's code that you own, raise a pull request to fix it. Again, without waking you up at 2 o'clock in the morning. And so again, another little demo from Microsoft. We've got a container app here sitting in an unhealthy state. Why? What's going on? There could be many things. So we come into SRE agent and just ask the simple question, why is the ACA IoT app not healthy? SRE agent heads off or experiencing connection issues. Here we are. There's a remediation workflow to kick it off. Analyze the IoT app for connectivity and health issues. Let's get the health metrics. There's our request count for the last 30 minutes. There's a pattern going on. Memory's fine, so it's probably not a memory issue on the way through. Let's keep working our way through. No critical errors or image pool failures, so we haven't got a container registry issue. There's an NSG rule that's blocking outbound traffic on a specific port, which is required for connecting to Redis. That could be a problem. Here's my suggestion. Would you like me to go and make that change for you? Done. It's been approved. It runs under the context of the user who's initiated it. So we've got all of the traceability as you would. That rule's done. And now everything's working. Now, how long would it take you to trace that through the logs to understand what was going on? If you had all of the access that you needed to do it. Let's be fair, that's the other half of the problem half the time, isn't it? That the operations team don't always have the insight and the access to the logs that they need access to. But now with that SRE agent, it can go and it can look and it can find that information for you from there. If you want to know more about the agentic DevOps and the SRE agent, highly recommend these 2 build sessions from there. So codes to take you straight through to those. In terms of that, I think it was BRK 100 and 102 from memory. But yeah, highly recommend. First one is an hour-long session. The second one, I think, is about a 20-minute presentation on SRE agent from there. And I will hand that back to Rory.
Thank you all for coming.
I turned it off.
Thank you all for coming. I hope you enjoyed a little tour around Build. So the good news is that if you go home and you watch 2 Build sessions every night for the next year, you will be finished them just in time for Build in 2020. And you can come back and get a whole lot of new homework. Yeah, please, we're going to close up now. Please return your plastic tags at reception. Sorry?
Jermaine?
Yes, Jermaine?
Oh, yep. Hi, team. I just got a question online for Ahmed from Surya. Are there any authentication and authorization check-based prompt shielding?
Is that the question about the Microsoft Entra ID?
I think that's the one we addressed earlier.
Oh, yeah. I think, we've already addressed this question earlier. So,
Okay, cool.
Basically, the answer is no, because you don't have the agentic actually talking to your Entra ID. It is supposed to be getting role access and identity from Entra. You want to protect against the bad actor from saying, like, asking the agentic to access data it's not supposed to be accessing, or like performing action or calling a tool that's not supposed to be calling. But basically, the answer is no. Yeah.
Thanks, Ahmed.
Right. Thank you, Shemaine, and thank you, everyone.